With Nigeria amongst the largest producers of crude oil in the world, oil theft has been one of the major problems the oil and gas sector in the country is facing today. Due to this persistent issue, Niger Delta Oil and Gas host communities have called on the Group Managing Director of Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, Mele Kyari, to stop oil theft, name and prosecute those behind the menace or resign. This is coming on the heels of the discovery by ex-militant leader, Government Ekpomukpolo, alias Tompolo, and security officials of about more tapping points, 42 more tapping points by crude oil bunkers on the nation's oil pipelines in 2 states of Delta and Bayelsa, bringing the total to 58. Arise News correspondent Illegitimacy George reports.
We'll stop.
On display at the Okporosa waterfront are seized items belonging to operators of illegal refinery camps in Delta State. Besides the seizure of items from the fleeing young men is the discovery of a 4-kilometer illegal pipeline connected to the Trans-Escravos trunk line at the Yokeri area of Delta State, which attracted a team from the federal government. Government Ekpomukpolo, popularly called Tompolo, acknowledges the role of security agencies collaborating with his security outfit.
If we see any creek that is blocked with a tree, we will bring in motor people to cross-cut it and then move inside. Where the security people cannot even go in, we will first of all go in, then ask them to follow, because we cannot do anything without the security. And with the way all of them actually cooperated, made us to achieve the desired result just now in Fokedus. These are our people, and this is our area. We are doing everything within our powers to see that we reduce this thing to a barest minimum, because the aquatic life of our area is almost gone. We only provide the intelligence. The security people will come and do the work. So we are even appealing to both the media houses and everybody to always be with us to achieve the desired results.
On Monday, the operatives of Tantita Security Services Nigeria Limited and the Navy seized an illegal bunkering vessel with stolen crude oil and a 7-member crew. The vessel was scheduled to take the stolen crude to Tema in Ghana.
We are going to appeal to federal government and NNPC that let's have fuel. If not, actually, people are facing a lot of challenges. But we are not going to use illegality to fight another illegality. That is the truth. So we'll do everything with our people, both the women and everybody. Everybody, we are working together by the grace of God to save our nation, our environment, and our people.
Tantita Security Services with the Nigerian military, who are doing their best to see that they know the root and the crux of why this hydra-headed syndrome of oil theft cannot be handled one day. The security agencies are doing their wonderful job assisting Tantita Security Services, who are providing only the intel for them while they enforce.
Illegitimacy George, Arise News.
Joining us on this show this morning as we discuss the continuous issue of oil theft in Nigeria is Sam Amadi, Arise News analyst, and Dan Kunle, an energy expert. Welcome to the morning show, gentlemen. Okay, let's go straight to business. Mr. Dan Kunle,
Thank you.
Let me start with you.
Thank you.
You have been in this oil and gas industry for years, and we're being told that there is collusion among many agencies, not just ordinary people stealing fuel. Even the Navy, named the IOCs and other oil companies. Now government is dealing with it, is trying to address it. Is it a problem that we can solve? And for you, Sam Amadi, the latest news out there is that, okay, we now have up to about 58 illegal tapping points And Tantita Security Services, in that report by Ovieteme George of Arise News, was able to intercept a vessel carrying, fuel illegally. And then, of course, they set it ablaze. Now, is that the right thing to do? Does that amount to destroying the evidence, as it were? Couldn't the vessel, empty Demba, it is called, couldn't it have been arrested? Anyway, let me start with you, Mr. Dan Kunle, on your thoughts generally.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ruben Abati. This hard talk, or let's say this hard conversation, is becoming too engaging for the country, and I think it's time we try to address it once and for all. The multi-security agencies, as the federal government security apparatus, the police, the army, the navy, the air force, they've been on this issue for years now. And if the state actors like them are not able to really give us anything concrete for us to write home about because of the various figures coming from them and various allegations and counter-allegations from all of them, including even the manager of the National State Enterprise, NNPC, giving us figures every day, identifying where things have gone wrong or have not gone wrong. And finally, if they are now agreeing to resort to state policing, or what you call now community policing, that means, to me, I think Delta State, Bayelsa, and Rivers, maybe they have gotten finally a community policing structure to take care of their wealth. That is the way it has gone now. I will intellectualize it like that finally the community have taken over their wealth. They are the one now to protect the wealth. So maybe this is what the international oil companies saw 20, 15 years ago as they started divesting from our onshore assets, onshore oil and gas assets, so as to move into the high seas within our economic zones. They saw it ahead of us, that look, these communities are getting very restful and they want to take charge of their resources and they will not allow us to work at our own pace. So they moved and started selling. And our federal actors, that is the federal government agencies, security agencies, perhaps they also saw it, but maybe it was beyond them. And today, I believe the community is now in charge of their assets. And I don't know, the architecture of the industry is not in the hand of the community. It's not in the hand of the Nigerian investors. So even finance, technology, know-how is not in their hand. So maybe we are just having a temporary arrangement to negotiate some peace with the community. But that is not going to be a sustainable arrangement for oil and gas production onshore to return to what we expect at all, because the deep investment required, even to clean up the environment alone that I just saw by the side now, the environment that are being damaged every day as we are talking, to clean it up, the master plan to clean it up, and the investment required is beyond what we are talking about. So let me just please allow Dr. Amadi to take on from here. I think, yeah.
Well, thank you, Ruben. Let me start by saying that in terms of the destruction of the vessel, clearly one can interpret it as destroying evidence, because basically all we now have is memory and history that this vessel was involved in oil bunkering. You don't have evidence anymore maybe to go further to investigate who owns it, who and what involves, if there are traces that can use for prosecution. And if that's the case, even if we can recreate it, forensically, we can recreate maybe for trial if there's going to be that. But the point is, it may suggest to us that much of this publicity now is some kind of PR that basically at the heart of government does still lack that resolve to prosecute this matter as criminality at the highest level. The chairman of the Bayelsa Council of Chiefs, Dakolo, wrote a book recently, which I did a review called Oil Thieves in the Nile Delta. And that book showed clearly linkage between people in government at the highest level and this large-scale, theft of oil. Now, it speaks about two things in my view. One is issue around legitimacy and criminality. Kunle talked about communities taking ownership. Part of the artisanal refineries and some of the thefts are questions around perception of illegitimacy. Yesterday on Arise News, the elder statesman Clark, Ike Clark, made a point that, look, if you go there, these resources, this sector is controlled by outsiders. Our people suffer bear the brunt of this crisis, and we have nothing. So it becomes part of resistance. You can call it small people resistance, eating up, gradually hitting back and collecting some of your resources through theft. But the bigger one, so you have legitimacy, illegitimate state, illegitimate arrangement around oil ownership and management. So people feel that they are being deprived, and a response, low energy response, would be this level of sabotage, whether it's in terms of destroying pipelines or in terms of stealing crude and tapping here and there. But the bigger one is actually the criminal enterprise, the state as a criminal enterprise, where those who have responsibility to manage these assets for common good are at the front of stealing them, using state authority. Stories, anecdotes around these vessels, oftentimes, having Nigerian flag and being under protection, some kind of military protection. You can't even, deal with them. So we need to resolve this crisis. Like I said, this could be a patchwork response, but the real crisis over this sector is a crisis of how do you create a sector that is commercially efficient and viable, but also legitimate in terms of public support and ownership, address issues of fiscal control and all that. But again, how do you have a government that really its managers are not in connivance, in conspiracy with private actors, whether they be bandits, criminals in terms of what we see all over the country, or they are maritime criminals working to sabotage the nation. At the highest level, people have responsibility. So there's clear evidence that we are dealing with high-level crime, and it feeds back into what we know about these criminalities and insecurity issues, whether it's banditry, where you hear collusion between, even if it's not prosecuting, not taking good effort to prosecute these criminals and stop the act. Now, you're talking about estimated $10 billion losses for 7 months by some analysis, about $700 million loss every year, every month. If you use $430 naira per dollar exchange rate. This is what the country is losing every day. And if you listen to analysts, right from the 1960s, Bill Dudley, one of the leading political scientists about Nigeria, this connivance between people in government and criminal elements, whether they're private sector, businessmen, or entrepreneurs, or all kinds of characters, to really hurt the country is at the heart of the failure of the Nigerian state. So when I was a young lawyer, I was part of Ogoni trial. I was part of being the Nile Delta, the Chikoko movement. I knew everything about that struggle. It has not changed. Illegitimacy and criminality. Even at that point, the part of the anger of the people, where they see that people in government were actually stealing this oil, not necessarily taking it and building hospitals in Imo or in Sokoto. We can say, look, they used it to develop the country, but that the people in authority can steal this oil, and then the people in the communities who suffer the ecological crisis that arises from all this have nothing, is what increased community criminality as well. So you have burning the candle at both ends, at the end of communities who are sabotaging and those in power.
Okay, I mean, Mr. Sam already very well said. And I was happy when Ike Clark was speaking yesterday, Pa Ike Clark, I should say. And he was saying this has spanned, many, many years. Many, many years, even over 40, 50 years, that crude oil has been stolen, at some scale, since the discovery in Olobiri in 56. But when you look deeply, we are not solving the problem yet. Like you said, burning of the evidence just shows that all of this attempt is a circus. Because how will people then now burn crude that is supposed to be useful to us and burn up everything about the ship after making an arrest like that? Where does the legal system come into play? So I'd like to ask, are we really serious about this, or we want another season film on television about crude oil theft? Because to a lot of people, that's what they see this as. Second installment in the season film on television. First, the pipeline, the tappings being seen. Secondly, burning of a ship. Maybe we don't know what next will come in. Maybe their directors and their cast and crew will tell us. Mr. Sam Amadi first, and afterwards, Mr. Dan Kunle will talk about this.
Yeah, okay. You see, Rufai, my view is this, very clear. What you said, the Nigerian crisis is foundational, and people have been saying this. The state order which we run is one that has privatized the states, and in a criminal way. So you're right. Since 1940, since 1958, Olobiri, I went there, Olobiri myself. I saw that when I was doing research for New York Center for Human Rights, Social and Economic Rights, and I discovered really that this is going to continue until we change the way the state is constructed. And this is not theoretical, it's simple. Now, what we are saying now is that if you continue to create an economy that is patronage-based, we'll talk about oil blocks, we'll talk about people having a windfall. So you get an oil block because you are connected and then you begin to make money. Now, if we don't recreate that state, that economy, to be an economy that's focused on transparency, accountability, and work, so that when you deal with oil resources, you are dealing with either people in the community own it, or in the state own it, and develop it, and contribute to the nation, or the federal government owns it and develop it through private sector, clear practices. And at the same time, we know how these funds can be seen through, tracked. Now, how do you begin to prosecute in a country where, if you look at the history of this country, you see that most of our billionaires have come from the military. Many of our billionaires today are former soldiers, those who are or civilians who have been at the highest level of government. So one story is clear. And the resources we have created in excess is oil. So this money has flown from stealing oil, either directly in bunkering or stealing oil from the proceeds in terms of embezzlement. So it seems to me that you need a bigger resolve. And you always talk about 2023. Maybe you need a set of leaders who have no complicity and who have no business ties with criminal elements who are responsible for these actions. So they can have that disinterest and incentive to go after them. We've seen that in this country we can make progress when we have no adverse incentive. Where leaders have no adverse incentive, they can prosecute remedial intervention very strict. But if people are connected to a criminal enterprise, and maybe an election campaign is coming, now is INEC ready to look at the books? Who are making these contributions? Some of these oil criminals, oil thieves, are going to be part of the political process, and they will create a government that must have a minimum commitment to keep them safe. So I think really why we celebrate some of this and the great work that Tom Polo and community, now we are seeing a renewed community commitment to protect the common good. And like Kunle said, I think that could be one takeaway, that we can strengthen collective community ownership and community intervention as a deterrence. This notion of a state that nobody owns, some people own it, but nobody owns it, is what creates that gap. So if people now realize that the government themselves, the elements in the government are criminal-minded, then they can take over and maybe force popular action will now force government action.
Okay, I mean, Mr. Dankula, I want you to talk about, because a lot of people are saying, yeah, this action film we're watching on TV comes at a cost. Let's not forget that it comes at a cost of close to 4 billion naira a month, to the taxpayers of this country. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Mr. Dankule. Because the tanker was born, oil tanker. Nobody was prosecuted.
Rufai, good morning. How are you today?
Sir. Pleasure to see you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. You see, this matter, Rufai, as Dr. Sam Amadi have just said, is foundational. If you look at the command era we inherited from 1966 to date, the command era is broken down now. So technology has broken it down. The information commodity today has made it impossible for the command era to work. Even countries that are battling to manage their command structure, it's not easy for them. So what is happening is that those figures, the figure you just mentioned now, Rufai, $4 billion.
$4 billion
Let
annually.
you and me rigorously interrogate, maybe annually, okay, whether annually or whether by month, by annually. Let us interrogate it carefully. The theft is one component. Losses, technical losses, is another component. Then shorting is another component. That is why when I see our political managers or political leaders are giving figures, I get worried. When the operators like NNPC are giving figures also, I always want to see that figure being signed by companies like McKinsey or Toadasi or Price Waterhouse, so that we can hold somebody responsible when you want to validate some of these figures they band about. Because the structure of the oil and gas production is today, if I tell you, you can map the entire Niger Delta, digital mapping, and you and me can check on daily basis. As I'm sitting here talking to you, I know the rig counts in America. The rig counts in America, I know it. So drilling rigs, production rigs, that's production platforms. So America can tell you their daily production at the close of every day. So if Nigerian operators and the managers of this sector refuse to digitize their production facilities and give us real-time online information, we will continue to band all these figures about. Because, to be very honest, if you go around that place, you will see that there is no facility you can use to load 1 million barrels just like that. It means you have to use the facility in Forcados, or Brass, or Bonny, or with there is a place we call Bonny River Terminal, operated by ExxonMobil. So if you are going to use any of these facilities to load all these volumes that translate to, say, maybe 4 billion, it means then you and me, we are sitting here to validate that it is true that the IOCs are involved. But I will give you an example of what happened recently. The Navy said they chased a VLCC up to Equatorial Guinea water territory. Okay. Total, that operates that platform, I have not had a word from them whether a barrel of crude oil was taken from their platform. Offshore platform, well organized. And I believe all the IOCs that are operating offshore, they have real-time online production monitoring facility back to their headquarters at home. So if a VLCC from Norway can come to that place to load, and Total have not said anything, I have not heard, maybe correct me, and Norway have not made any statement about the vessel, please, you can begin to see. So later we have heard now that they have not lifted even a liter of crude oil. So how do we conjure all these stories and we now give our children figures for them to swallow and say, oh, you are losing this much. Oh, you are losing this much. We give the same figure to our leaders. So, Rufai, I will never be among the people that will just ban figures about. I will not, because I am being scientifically oriented and exposed So I don't, the way Nigerian leaders talk about figures, it's not, so the reality is that we need a forensic audit. But to carry out a forensic audit means we must bring somebody from above, because the structure of the industry is not in our hand at home here in Nigeria. We only try to pretend that we are good. Yes, we are good engineer in the classroom. We are good, but we never constructed rigs. We never constructed flow stations. So we need somebody from outside to give us a helicopter view and forensic audit of what has been happening from the time the IOC started divesting. Because the transfer period, when IOC handed over 45% to you, there is a time lag between the time he handed over to you and the time the new operators takes over. What happened in all these intervals? We need somebody to give us near accurate. I use the word near accurate because it can never be accurate, but we can get experts from outside that are independent, that will now give us that figure, if at all we want to have it for record, or we want to maybe recover some money if possible. But otherwise, that exercise, because we will pay heavy fee for it, that exercise will just be for political purpose, or just for documentation, for research purposes. So to come back to the reality at home here now, with the community policing the federal government has resorted into now, which means now every community in Nigeria can now take charge of their resources. That's the meaning. If I have gold at the back of my house in Kunle, it means I can organize the community to protect my gold for me. That's what the federal government have resorted to, which is very good. For me, I have no quarrel about it.
Mr. Kunle.
So that is it.
Mr. Kunle and Dr. Amadi, you still have to stay with us before I bring up the next issue. But still on the issue of oil theft, elder statesman Edwin Clark is calling on the federal government to set up a panel to investigate and prosecute those stealing the country's crude oil. Paike Clark says the government can have tremendous success if there is political will to tackle the issue and its environmental effects in the region. Here is a report.
The reason why the Niger Delta youths are engaged in oil bunkering. I am not defending them, but at the same time, they are doing it for survival. I remember I gave a lecture in Lagos one day, and I said, our youth from the Niger Delta, who are posted to the north, to the south, east, and to the southwest, return home at the end of the year without a job in those states. But their counterparts from the north, from the west, from the southeast are posted to our area, are employed in the oil industry because the managers, the senior managers, and the managing directors in the NNPC are their brothers. And the ethnicity is one. Ethnicity is one of the things what killing Nigeria.
Okay, I think it would be nice, Dr. Amadi and Mr. Kunle, for us to interrogate a little some of the points raised by Paike Clark. Dr. Amadi, let me start with you. Now, Paike Clark is saying that those engaged in illegal oil bunkering, they're doing it because of survival, and then there is politics also involved in it. What do you think of that, considering the fact that the surveillance contract that you referred to earlier, which you seem to support, which Mr. Kunle seems to be skeptical about, caused subdivision among northern youths? You had on one hand a group of northern youths calling themselves concerned northern youths, saying that no, this will promote criminality. And then you have the coalition of northern youths on the other side saying no, because the process went through due process, then of course it's in order. And then you have NNPC coming and saying no, this is not a personal contract for Tompolo. It's for Tantiata Security Services in which Tompolo has an interest. But let's interrogate that. And then Mr. Kunle, when it is your turn, you recall that when NNPC announced that an illegal pipeline 4 kilometers long, was discovered, and that it had been operating for 9 years. I mean, you are in this space. How did they determine that the thing had been on for 9 years? Can you determine the age of a pipeline by just looking at it? And then, is it possible to lay a pipeline of 4 kilometers to steal crude oil for 9 years and nobody would discover? I thought they said at some point technology was deployed in the oil and gas sector. What happened to the technology? Okay, but let me start with Dr. Amadi. Dr. Amadi.
Okay, thank you very much, Ruben. First, let me be very clear here. In an organized, orderly state, nobody would award these contracts to individuals, militants, persons who have no pedigree, essentially in the sector. You go to well-organized institutions with corporate personality and organizational capital and discipline, because this is not just about economics, it's also about national security. And so you would say, what the heck, what's going on here? And let's not forget that Tompolo had a contract before Buhari came to power under the previous government, PDP government. And when they came in power, they said criminality, state capture, and they brushed aside. And now they brought back the same, what looks like the same kind of contract. Now, but the prudential argument will be this, and this is very important. In economics, we talk about government failure, and so when government fails, they bring market solutions. So government fails, you bring market. That's why we privatize to public entities, to persons who are not public, who are not even in Nigeria, because we feel that government failed in delivering service. There's a seemingly total government failure across the country. Basic things, law and order issues that government can handle, either for lack of political will, what we now call political will, which means they are connived, they are involved. The actors on the ground know that, look, they can't deal with the huge conflict of interest involved at their source to now ragtag, groups. That's what you are seeing here. And so that's where we are. In real sense, we shouldn't be awarding those contracts to either Tompolo or so-called company that he has majority share in, because he has no special skills in the formal sense of doing that. But because this is also, like Elder Statesman observed, some level of community disaffection, some level of community action, then a man who has such huge human social standing in that community, in a prudential sense, can be your best option when you don't have an organized state. So what we're getting to now is that Nigeria is becoming a disorganized state, where state effectiveness is a mirage, it's a notion. We are not able to police our borders in northern Nigeria, to protect our communities, so we are sourced to either their head-on hunters or whatever we call them, or even pay ransom, or do deals with criminal elements that we should be fiercely killing off. But the realism is that we need to secure some peace, some accord. So I see the Tompolo, now whether it's him or personal, as maybe successful to the extent that today we are talking about this, is giving us what we ought to know officially, that 56 points where oil is stolen. Some urban legend is that Tompolo discovered government ship stealing now. He's the one who has discovered that the actual government is a thief. So it's pathetic. Like Kunle, the experts will look at this and say, this is like a joke. And that's how we've set up the country. So I would say, yes, this contract should go, again, issue of legality, should go through a due process. And if he bids with a company that has the technical and financial and managerial competence to win, and they win, then it shouldn't be said because it's Tompolo. I mean, look at the way we have been privatizing our institutions. Portfolio investors do some MOU with big international agencies that bring supposed technical capability, and they win the bid. So why should it be different in the case of Tompolo? The same methodology of briefcase investors or entrepreneurs, whether they were former criminals or drug barons, as long as they meet those technical specifications, they win the bid. But I would say that, look, this is like government wanted to buy off, get time, some political relief, give these guys, they have this, they control these militants, they will put some order, and it looks like they're working. They're sharing the loot, quote unquote, across the communities in Niger Delta, and they're helping those militants who, out of provocation, or a mixture of provocation and criminality, are sabotaging and committing this theft, to hold back because their kingpin is giving them something that they need. So this is like government, somebody spiting their face to, hitting your face, cutting your face to spite your nose. We just have to get it right. And it may be a long journey, but it starts with resetting a new concept of the country. This must be a country that we have to solve three basic problems. One is a problem of citizenship, ownership. Who owns the country? The second is a problem of order. How do we restore basic order in terms of procurement, in terms of security, in terms of everything? And then a sense of belonging. Everybody, legitimacy. People just feel that, look, the country works for us. And it really doesn't matter whether the companies that are doing this oil are from Norway or Europe or in America, or they're from London or from Lagos or Kaduna. The key point is that we can see through the process, we can trust the leaders, the procedures are clear and clean, and the values being delivered are quantifiable and verifiable. When we run that kind of modern state, whether it's capitalist or socialist, it doesn't matter. Then you get the result.
Well, Dr. Amadi, let's bring in Mr. Kunle at this point. Mr. Kunle, those questions are raised. And why it was so difficult to know the location, whether it was Focados or Escravos of the pipeline. At first, we were told it was Focados. Later, we were told it's Escravos. Is it so difficult to know where these assets are?
You see, Dr. Abati, all these geographical location and the exact locations, they can confuse the Nigerian people easily because I talk about mapping. If you have the mapping, the land does not change position. It remains fixed. The geographical location of where that pipe is located cannot suddenly change. What happens is this. The joint venture between NNPC and the IOCs, every asset deployed has record, asset record. The independent operators, they also have asset record. That is those operating that are not in JV with NNPC. So MPDC in Benin that are on behalf of NNPC also entering into some management contracts to build up some of the assets that has been surrendered by the IOCs. They also have asset record. So there is no how a pipeline around Escravos or Chanomi Creek or Ogidingbi, all those areas. There's no how somebody will build 4 kilometers pipeline into the sea. The engineering involved is not small. I don't know the size of that pipe. The engineering involved is not small because you are going to have to do drilling. Then, where is the key wall and the manifold where the vessel will come to anchor and load? Where is the compressor station? So when they give us some of these figures, those of us who have fair knowledge of the structure of the industry, we don't swallow it immediately. We say, this information is half-baked. So to even tell you 9 years, okay, look, if it is 9 years, how can NNPC Limited, who is an offshoot of NNPC Corporation, say that in 9.5 years or in 9 years, they've not been able to know where that their asset is when they have joint venture contract with the operators? So that again put a question on their own capacity to manage the resources at their disposal. So the age of that pipeline, Dr. Abati, you asked a question. That question is a question that is subjective to corrosion scientists, because the extent to which that pipeline have corroded is part of what they will use to determine the age of that pipeline, because a lot of corrosion might have taken place. You know, crude oil could be very, very aggressive because it carries sulfur. So it might have been corroding. So it may look like pipe of 20 years. Maybe it's not even more than 5 years. So those issues what we need to go back, let me just add to what Dr. Amadi have said. What we need is a restructured governance, because the global pressure on all of us, weak countries cannot carry it. That is what is going on. Strong countries in the world are battling with the pressure. So Nigeria, as it is today,
Mr. Dankule,
we need to be reorganized properly.
Mr. Dankule,
if we are to contend with some of these issues. Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Dankule, real quickly. Recently, the NNPC took journalists to show them their control room. They said they are digitizing. Was it just a smoke screen, or is it being functional? And why is it that if NNPC have a control room that is digital to monitor a pipeline, why are they still giving a multi-billion-dollar contract, you know, to Tompolo and Tantana Securities? The contract is worth 48 billion naira, 4 billion naira every month, 48 billion naira annually. Briefly, sir.
Thank you, Rufai. You see, the contradiction in all these things is in your statement. NNPC and NNPC Limited, because NNPC is still sitting on the huge liability of NNPC Limited, which we have not been shown. NNPC Corporation is still having huge liability and also asset. We have not known where those liability will be situated. We have not known where the asset will be situated. We are still waiting, okay, to hear. So now, if NNPC Limited, that's supposed now to be an operator, an investor, an operator, and a holding company, said they have a monitoring control center, and in one hand, they now give out a contract for surveillance and protection of the onshore asset. You have a question there now. What is the nature of your monitoring center? What is the nature of the monitoring center? What is the configuration of what you have there? And what is it monitoring? I hope you can see. So then the contract you have given out, which for me, I still repeat, is a good way to start restructuring the country. You have outsourced. You have given up as a federal command order, a command system. You have given out state policing, community policing. So you have indirectly said, oh yes, you agree now that this type of contract can be given out, which indirectly you have surrendered. So NNPC has helped federal government to expose that they have lost control of the resources. This is the only way to intellectualize what has happened. It's not, we are not sitting here to judge whether somebody is right or wrong. Our rationalization, or my rationalization, is that the command era in Nigeria since 1966 is going to flatten out, whether we like it or we don't like it. Because NNPC Limited themselves, they need the social license from the community to operate. That is it. Now, in my state recently, I'm aware my governor arranged for people to go to take over the largest cement factory in Africa. I have never had a thing like that in my life. It's impossible. But that again shows you that even something is amiss. So I think NNPC Limited, when we see the whole skeleton, because at the moment we don't know what is going on yet, because they are reforming themselves, and I don't see how they can reform themselves, because they are still sitting on certain things we don't know. They want to do pipeline to Morocco, $25 billion. So we are hearing more. But when we start to know the details, we will all, because this contract for pipeline surveillance and security and safety in the Niger Delta, I can tell you it is the beginning of the outsourcing of the security apparatus of this country by federal government.
On that note,
it is a sign that every community are going to now organize themselves.
On that note, we'd like to thank you very much, Mr. Kunle and Dr. Sam Amadi, for joining us this morning to discuss this very important subject of crude oil theft in Nigeria.